Hey Moira and everybody at Chooks. My name is Katzan and I'm really, really gutted that I can't be there for the awesome event on the 7th of April to talk about different governance structures for social businesses. As you can see, I'm wearing my Chooks badge and I'm based out of Sydney, so I am sending my thoughts in advance. Normally, when people think about governance structures, they'll think about a legal structure. I'm sure that you've got lawyers that will advise you on whether or not you set up a sole proprietorship or a not for profit in a public company limited by guarantee or in a partnership or some other structure. So I won't talk about that. But what I will talk about is a different type of structure, a Yunus social business, which is a concept that's starting to take hold in Australia, but probably isn't as well known as your traditional not for profit or powerful foundation or charity type governance structure, if you will. What a Yunus social business is, the technical term is that it's a non dividend company that is solving a human problem. Now, the challenge that we have in Australia is that we've got, one of the wealthiest nations in the world. We've got very high educational levels, but what we do with all of that talent is when we're faced with the social problem, we will outsource to either government or usually the charity sector to try and solve it for us. And there's challenges with that. So with government, they're typically not renowned for being dynamic, and they're typically more process oriented and not very fast. So the outcomes that we're seeking to get are either really inefficiently achieved or quite slow. And in the not-for-profit sector and charity sector, even though that's fantastic and can have some amazing applications, the challenge there is that it's not viable in long term. You're constantly sort of seeking out donations, and if you do, for example, get an investor, there is risk of mission drift. And we typically think of solving social problems in just one of these two existing ways. What Professor Muhammad Yunus, who's the founder of Grameen Bank and was in Adelaide a few weeks ago, is advocating is that there's another way of doing that. What he does, and something Grameen Australia is really at the, really trying to promote and develop here, is to think about how to solve a social problem, and when you find a solution, plugging a business engine behind it. And what that means is instead of offering a handout and consistently going to donors for philanthropic money and using these charity dollars just one way, what happens when you apply that seed capital into your organization that is a social business is that you've got the opportunity to create a funding stream that enables the business eventually to become sustainable. The reason Professor Yunus created this concept of social business is because our current, as we know, capitalist system is broken, and part of the reason of that is that we have an incomplete understanding and expression of the human spirit. Typically, we've got only profit maximizing businesses in our economy, and they are. And when you think about profit maximizing, the obligation to shareholders is to maximize the shareholders' interests. And when we think about interest, we think about self-interest or a selfish motivation. And of course, Professor Yunus advocates that humans are not just selfish, they're also selfless. But until we've had this social business model or this concept surface, there wasn't really a way to funnel capital into selfless types businesses. There was only a way of giving philanthropic money through a charity or a not-for-profit. A social business is very much for profit. The difference is that the profit gets hosed back into the business, and the purpose of the business is to either give employment to or solve problems for disadvantaged people, or offer goods and services to disadvantaged people in a way that is accessible for them or affordable to them. There are novel ways of creating social businesses, and it doesn't just have to be the traditional one, which is microfinance, where an organization loans money to low income people so that they can use it as working capital to build up a business, create a profit, and then pay the loan back. And typically microfinance as a social business organizations are also owned by the borrowers. There's examples of actually tech companies that are applying this concept of social business in the way that they structure themselves. One such social business is structured as a not-for-profit, but it's very much profit generating. It's called Humanitix. It's the world's first not-for-profit ticketing platform. Now, what the people at Humanitix, Josh Ross and Adam McCurdy, have done is they wanted to use their business acumen and business knowledge for social good. What they decided to do was find, in thinking about how they can use their background as a fund manager and as a management consultant in the social sector, they wanted to create a business that could be easily scalable, or not easily, but certainly scalable through technology. And 100% of the profits were able to be deployed to a charity of the user's choice. And the business that they chose was the mature ticketing industry. So they've created a ticketing platform called Humanitix that competes with Eventbrite and Ticketek to create an opportunity for event organizers to, instead of the booking fees go to the shareholder, choose for the booking fees to go to a charity of the event organizer's choice. Now, this means that the event organizer enables them to offer their guests an opportunity to get access to charities and offer everyday philanthropy where they otherwise wouldn't. And it gives charities a different capital distribution channel that they otherwise wouldn't have. So it's a funder for the ecosystem of charities. And for the event organizer, the attractive proposition for it is that it doesn't cost any more to use Humanitix than it would an Eventbrite or a Ticketek. It's sort of a $4.99 booking fee off a $100 ticket, whereas if you were using one of those other organizations, it'd be like $9 or $10, and that's quite an attractive proposition. So it doesn't cost more to do the right thing in this case. So a social business is a business in which if you're a philanthropist, it's very attractive because instead of just having, your 10,000 or whatever dollars just go one way, there's an opportunity for you to seed an actual business that starts to create a revenue that then sends the, once it becomes cash flow positive and has enough capital to return back to you, can actually return the capital to you. Interestingly, with this model of social business, you can apply the new entrepreneurship model to it, or the Nobbin model, which is what Professor Yunus and the Yunus Centre are doing. And that is to make it fair for an investor. Instead of a philanthropic donation just going one way, in a social business, the capital seeds the business starts to make a profit, the capital can get returned to the investor in an equity stake. And instead of them getting a capital return, they don't get a capital return, but rather they've got the opportunity to make somewhat of an investment fee by also having a share transfer fee fixed at 20% when the capital is returned. So they don't get a dividend because, of course, dividends are profits that go straight into the business and keep nourishing the business, but at the end they can get the share transfer fee of 20%, which is not a capital gain, but recognizes the effort and coaching that they put into making sure that the entrepreneur is successful in the business. Like a typical investor-entrepreneur relationship. So that's a really exciting, I guess, legal governance structure for a social business. And I guess the final point I'd like to make, because I did want this to be relatively short, is that when we're thinking about governance, I always think about oversight and checks and balances and managing a business well. One way that some social businesses will, leverage their governance structures to optimize their outcomes is through their board. So board is there really to be able to leverage their talents and their networks to help the business thrive, but also make sure that decisions are being made in the most, in the right way. It can be tempting if you want to make sure that you've got a really engaged inner circle to just keep adding more and more people onto your board until it becomes really quite large, sort of 12 people, 10 people. That's a really large board, and there's actually other ways that you can engage people who can really support the business. One of those ways is having working groups or advisory committees. So people who are engaged on a periodic basis to be able to help with either particular projects or particular areas of concern like fundraising or technology or innovation, getting fresh ideas into the organization. And these sort of advisory committees might be a different way to retain that energy and that knowledge in an inner circle without plumping your board out, because the board is not necessarily a silver bullet. And the other way to get good governance is to make sure that you're engaging with your borrowers or your clients or your beneficiaries. So some organizations will have beneficiary circles, so they can keep constantly talking to them and making sure that they're still serving the beneficiaries' needs in real time. And that's a really good way to make sure that you're staying current and keeping on top of the trends that are impacting your beneficiaries as well, from a governance perspective from their end. So those are my thoughts. Social business is another way to think about structuring the way that you deliver social good to your community and humanity, and also thinking about different ways of leveraging the people in your network. The board is one of them, but it's not the silver bullet, and you can have lots of other engaged groups in your ecosystem to ensure that your social business continues to thrive and grow, succeed, get funding, and the capital that it needs in order to solve some of humanity's greatest challenges. Thank you.